afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very important session, Taking Action for the Ocean. I'm Francine Lacqua of Bloomberg. Now, we're trying to do a little something different this year. For the first time, we will be broadcasting the panel live on TikTok, our social-first global news network. Now, this panel will seek to engage viewers, of course, our audience, so please ask your questions and remember to hashtag WEF19, hashtag TikTok Davos. Now, our oceans are really the basins of life and cover 3/4 of our planet. Think about that. As vast and powerful as they can be, they are also very fragile. They suffer from overheating and acidification. Fish are being pulled out, plastic is being poured in, very few of oceans are protected habitats. So discuss this panel today, world leaders, philanthropists, and activists, but most importantly, it's a panel of people like you and like me who are acting. But are we too late? Let's welcome our panelists today. Al Gore, environmentalist, Nobel laureate, and the former vice president of the United States of America. He's the chairman and co-founder of Generation Investment Management, an investment manager with a focus on sustainability. Michelle Bachelet was a political prisoner in her home nation of Chile, where she would later serve as president twice. She has devoted her efforts to human rights activism in UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Marc Benioff, an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and the founder, chairman, and co-chief executive of Salesforce. He also founded the Benioff Oceans Initiative, which runs a crowdsourcing platform to identify problems and fund solutions for ocean conservation. Nina Jensen, a marine biologist, she's the chief executive of REV Ocean, whose mission it is to explore and better understand the ocean. And Enric Sala, a marine ecologist and a National Geographic explorer in residence, dedicated really to restoring the health and productivity of the ocean. So thank you all for joining me. How bad is it? Do we actually understand the reality of what we're faced? It's a harsh reality. Vice President.
I don't think there's a widespread understanding, at least not a sufficient one, of how bad it is. We have a true, full-blown global emergency. And if that phrase sounds too hyper, I'm sorry. It just reflects what the scientific community tells us. The fact that their predictions have been spot on from what they've said in the past should lead us to listen to them about this. It's connected to the climate crisis, by the way. As you said, we're taking fish out and putting plastic in. We're also putting heat in. The global warming pollution the man-made global warming pollution that's accumulated in the atmosphere now traps as much extra heat energy as would be released by 500,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day. 93% of that heat energy goes into the oceans. And with all due respect to Las Vegas, what happens in the ocean doesn't stay in the ocean. The stronger storms, the disruption of the water cycle, it's being acidified, and there's more. And I look forward to this panel because we've got some real experts here.
What's the reality you saw?
Well, the same. I mean, I believe that majority of people are not really understanding the problem. I mean, not everyone is, even though I would say that you have seen a trend, and particularly in young people, who do understand that climate change is a terrible threat, and do understand also the role that oceans play on it. That can be a very positive one or a negative one, as we all know. We all know that, of course, temperature of the seas are rising, acidification is happening, and that means a lot of consequences. And we already seen in the video the positive side of oceans. And so many people, it's like 30% of the population that live on coastal areas and their livelihood depends on the possibility of oceans. So we have lots of issues that needs to be addressed because not only on climate change, but also on illegal fishing, on overfishing because of a lack, I would say, of understanding sooner of how important this is.
Marc, do people understand what acidification is? I can barely pronounce it.
Well, I think that now is an incredible time for everyone to decide that they're going to do one thing for the ocean. Certainly, we also have to decide we're all going to do something for the environment. But let's specifically talk about the ocean. About 18 months ago, we started here at the World Economic Forum our Friends of Ocean Action, which I'd like to invite everyone here to join. This was started out of our Benioff Ocean Initiative, which is led out of the University of California, Santa Barbara. And it's been an incredible set of learnings for us, but also a very optimistic year because 1 year ago, Justin Trudeau was here, who went through briefings on the ocean for the first time with us at the World Economic Forum, and that's why you saw prioritization in June with the G7 for the first time saying that oceans is one of their top 5 priorities. The G20 is...
And it's not too late. It's not a little too late.
I'm an optimistic person, and I believe that we can take change and create change right now. There's very specific actions that we can take, and we can talk about some of those things as well. But I think having the G7 and G20 start to prioritize ocean health, this is extremely important because sometimes the ocean is out of sight, out of mind. It's so big, everyone will say, "Oh, it looks fine." Well, it looks, I don't know, looks like it did 6 months ago. But things are changing. It is getting hotter. We do have overfishing. We do have things going on that we need to directly address. Coral bleaching. We have seabed mining. I'd like to talk about that at some point. But there's many things that we all can do right now to make the ocean much healthier.
So, Nina, in 2021, you want to launch the world's largest research and expedition vessel to acquire more knowledge.
Yes.
Why don't we have that knowledge now?
Well, we do have a lot of knowledge that we should act on already now, but I mean, people on this planet seems to be more insistent on exploring outer space than what is actually here, which is also kind of surprising given the ocean's importance for our mere existence. I mean, all life on this planet originated in the oceans. At the same time, we're treating them as a waste dump, which is awful. And I think if everyone knew how serious the situation for the oceans actually are, everyone would be activists. And to put it in perspective, in my lifetime, our lifetime, over the past 40 years, we've lost more than 40% of life in the oceans, and it's accelerating as a result of climate change, ocean acidification, pollution, and the likes. So what we want to do is obviously improve our knowledge and understanding of the oceans, bring that knowledge to decision makers in a much better way and make it more understandable, but then most importantly, turning that knowledge into very concrete solutions and act now.
Enric?
I think we know enough, right? It's difficult to overstate the problem. Just some examples. More than half of the surface of the ocean is targeted by industrial fishing. That's a footprint that is larger than agriculture's. 90% of the large fish in the ocean, sharks, tuna, cod, are gone. We ate them in the last 100 years. 90% of the fisheries of the world are either fully exploited or overexploited. By 2040, and I'm going to depress everybody now, by 2040, there's going to be no sea ice in the Arctic Ocean during summer months. Coral reefs are going to be a thing of the past by 2050 if we continue our ways, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this not only affects marine life, it affects people too. Think about the humanitarian crisis. When we have fleets from industrialized countries fishing off the coast of West Africa, for example, and legally and illegally, and depriving those local people from food security, and these people then have to go to Europe. That we have a real problem, and it's only going to get worse. And the economic implications are huge. Right now, $23 billion every year are lost because of illegal fishing, right? And we subsidize the overexploitation of the ocean with $35 billion per year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really bad. We don't know how many species are in the ocean. We only know 20% of what's there, but we know enough to know it's bad, and we need to do something now.
If I could add just a couple of brief points. First of all, you said, is it too late earlier? I would like to briefly make the point that none of us has the right ever to say it's too late. It is never too late. But back to this. You know the statistic that by 2050, at current trends, the weight of the plastic in the ocean will exceed the weight of all the fish in the ocean. And we are still taking out of the ocean each year the human weight of China in fish and the illegal fishing, pirate ships. Now, another point. The oceans and the atmosphere are very tightly coupled. And as the oceans warm all the way down to 2,000 meters, the capacity of the oceans to absorb CO2 diminishes. And up until now, the oceans have been a sink for CO2. That's caused the acidification, unfortunately, which contributes to the loss of corals. But as the oceans warm, we will not have that buffer. So it makes it more difficult to deal with climate. But the good news is, with satellite tracking and with all of the new digital tools we have, if we decide as a world to protect the oceans, we can do so. We need governments to be activated. We need policy changes. And those of us who are privileged to be alive at this hinge of history moment need to make a decision that we will protect the oceans and protect our planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've heard here that 18 months ago, the World Economic Forum started thinking on those issues, and then the G7, G20. But let's us remember that in the Paris Agreement, I mean, a long time ago, like 3 or more years ago, there was this Because the Ocean Declaration that many countries committed to. So even though I understand when Al said it's never too late and you never have to give up, because I have the same attitude at issues, I think we're obligated to accelerate action.
Absolutely.
Because, Paris Agreement was many years ago. And Katowice, COP24 last year, they approved a plan of action on many issues on climate change, also on oceans. So that's positive, but it has to happen 3 years afterwards. Mm-hmm. And if we continue doing business as usual, we're not going to get there. We're not going to meet the objectives, the Sustainable Development Goals, and we're not going to be able to stop this. So I'm fine to say it's never too late, but I'm a little bit concerned because I think countries and companies had not taken enough understanding and effort on changing and doing the right things.
Nina.
I agree. I think there's every reason to be concerned, but at the same time, the problems that we're seeing in the oceans are caused by humans, which means we also have every opportunity to do something about it. And what really gives me reason for optimism is seeing how high the oceans are actually on the global agenda at the moment. I don't think I've seen a single issue like plastics where companies, business leaders, governments have come together to really try to solve this, and even seeing all the commitments from the World Economic Forum and what's happening here, I think is great cause of optimism.
Yeah. Let me give you one specific case for optimism. For those of you who know, we have the fourth industrial revolution underway, and it's one of the major topics here at this conference. We also have the World Economic Forum's fourth industrial revolution center in San Francisco that studies and also articulates that on global policy issues. That's things like autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, all these incredible new technologies. Well, currently underway, there's quite a few companies that are assembling these incredible new 4IR technologies to create vehicles that will do seabed mining. Seabed mining is the pursuit of all of these kind of precious stones and minerals and gases and all the things they'd like to go find in the ocean. And they're assembling these vehicles now. You all seen what autonomous vehicles look like, but once they disappear under the water, nobody's going to exactly know where they are. Well, they're all about to go under there. And as they're digging and grinding things up and chewing up the bottom of the ocean, also, we're going to get all these toxic plumes that are going to be coming up, and fish are going to get being absorbed into all that, and it's all going to come into our ecosystem and in our food chain. It's going to be one of the most devastating things that's ever happened to the ocean, seabed mining. Well, guess what? Hasn't started yet. So we need everyone here to start becoming an expert on that, to think about that, to get to your local politicians. We have Peter Thompson here, who is our UN ambassador for the ocean. He's working on that. But we need declarations around seabed mining that are going to protect the ocean and make sure that as that happens, we're going to need to have authorities and auditing and proper governance around that. But it has not yet happened. So that's a case for optimism, that we know that there's things today that have not happened that we can stop or manage better than we would without knowing about them. That's an awareness issue. Right. On the second point, we also know that when we look at plastics in the ocean, we heard about more plastic in the ocean, than fish by 2050, and nobody wants a plastic ocean, right? So, but we also know that it's 9 rivers that really contribute the vast majority of that plastic, and that river management needs to become a critical part of policy and work, and we're seeing river machines getting built and generated to get that plastic out of the rivers before they start. That's something that we can do now.
Who's causing plastic pollution? Is it certain regions in the world? Is it business? And are they willing to change
Plastic
or do
has
something
become
about
the
it?
nuclear waste of our generation. It has been generated and it is not going away. All of this mythology about it being recycled is crazy. You know, it's not really getting recycled that I can find. And we need next generation materials, which we can do. Great companies who are experts in this area, like Dow, DuPont, Honeywell, and others who create plastic, need to create biodegradable plastic, and they are. But we need that now. So that's another thing that, again, the 4IR, you know, I hope that innovation, technology, risk-taking, entrepreneurship, the things that have, you know, that we know, we see back where I live, you know, in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, maybe some of these things will help us. And maybe that's a case also for optimism.
I mean, the biggest polluters, do they want to get better? Or actually, because their economy is so reliant on it, or on unsustainable fishing, that actually they don't want to be part of this roundtable?
Well, I think some probably do. I would say none are doing enough. And once again, to put it in perspective, I mean, over the past 10 years, we have produced more plastics than we did over the past century. And this is set to continue to increase over the next few years. What we need is to completely stop using single-use plastics, period. There is no need for it. We have plenty of alternatives, and it's just causing a massive environmental problem. What it once again gives me optimism is that, you know, world leaders have agreed on a zero vision for plastics. A lot of companies have come up with alternatives. Places even like the World Economic Forum are trying to get rid of single-use plastics, and that's the only direction we need.
And by the way, that's a huge advancement just in the last, you can look back at this conference 48 months ago or other conferences, that we are making progress, I think, in that
Enric,
world.
is this not just happy talk? People coming together saying, yeah, we'll do more, it's great, let's sign up. But actually, fundamentally, nothing really changes.
Well, I feel like we are at the casino in the Titanic, right? And we're trying to make as much money as possible after hitting the iceberg.
Okay.
And so when you think about the economics, the World Wildlife Fund released a report a couple years ago showing that the goods and services provided by the ocean are equivalent to $24 trillion. And the gross marine product is like 5% of the global GDP. That would be, the ocean will be the 7th world's economy. But this is a vast underestimate, because this is only a reflection of the things that we can monetize. But for example, every other breath we take comes from the ocean, and it's bacteria, microscopic algae, and seaweed along the coast that produces oxygen, right? If we had the industrial capacity to produce that oxygen, to purify that oxygen from the atmosphere, I did the calculation, not now, before we're coming here, it would cost, replacing that service that the ocean life provides, it would cost 800 times the global GDP, right? And we are already reducing the amount of oxygen in the ocean, not only because of warming, which makes that the ocean can absorb less oxygen, but also because we are hampering the ability of ocean life to continue providing for us.
What would you do different? If you were in charge of regulating the ocean economy, what are your top 3 priorities, Enric?
I would put Michelle Bachelet as president. And I will let her explain what she did in Chile. But you know, the 3 main things are pollution, mostly plastic pollution, and there are 10 rivers that produce 80 or 90% of the plastic. These are the choke points. You know? It's waste management also. Climate change, we need to get emissions down to almost zero. And then fishing. Fishing, we know that when you don't kill the fish, they take a longer time to die, and they grow larger, and they reproduce more. And when you protect an area from fishing, marine life comes back spectacularly. Places that I've dived all around the world, and places that were dead recover spectacularly after a few years. And it only takes political leadership. And if Madam President would like to explain what she did in Chile, it can be done.
Well, yes. One of the typical excuses on combating climate change or preserving ocean is to say, I'm not a rich country. I cannot do it. I'm a small country. But Chile is a medium, small economy. But we took this very seriously. Participating in our ocean initiative permanently, we decided that we are not going to sign an agreement and then do nothing about it. So thanks to our work with Nat Geo, Pristine Seas, Oceana, Pew, and universities, we also not only identify what we wanted to do, but which were the hotspots for creating marine protected areas. Because some places, they protect areas that don't have any positive results on biodiversity. So we did that, and we identified. When I arrived to my last government, 4% of we have 4% of the exclusive economic zone as marine protected area. And after 4 years, when I left, we went in between 43 to 46%. So it can be done. And we have seen, of course, as Enric, we done it in Rapa Nui, that's what normal people call Easter Island. Mm-hmm. We did a good job. Also, the fishermen there started to fish in a very traditional way and not overfishing. And then we could recover the sea lion. In other places, we could recover tuna fish, the roy orange fish. There's a lot of fishes that we have been able to recover. But also, and I have to say, for a political leader, it's not always an easy thing, because also you have tensions inside your government.
Right.
You have an environmental minister who's pushing with that, and of course, in this case, the president was pushing, but anyway. But then you have an economy minister who, in my case, it was also responsible for fishing.
And so fishing lobbies.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. Companies are not yet completely, I would say, clear that this is something urgent and that it might have some consequences on the short term, but in the medium long term, it will be very beneficial, even for the planet, but also for the... But we also did two other things, because we understood that oceans are fine, but we need to do something else. We created also national parks the size of Switzerland, and also we, and Al knows that very good, we did an energetic revolution. So we sort of change completely our matrix. Now renewables are so important, and really are. I hope that we'll continue to do it, and we want to show that it is possible and it can be done. And you need political will and convincement.
And you put a tax on carbon.
Yes, also.
And you persuaded your industry to support it.
Yes, we did.
Michelle Bachelet, when you say, it takes a little bit of convincing for companies, what would you tell them? I mean, do you have to go with the data? Do you have to show them of other places where it's worked?
Well, I think you have to do all of that. Show the facts, show places where it works, show that it is beneficial. I mean, sort of what we would say the business case, to do the business case. But also, I think that as political leaders, you need to make decisions. Even sometimes companies will not agree in some areas, but at the end they will understand. And the other thing that I've been doing is talking to the World Bank, because usually in all these issues, people estimate cost of action, and they say, no, this is too expensive, I cannot do this, because it will mean, a decreasing of my GDP or whatever. But nobody, and I asked the World Bank to do it, estimates the cost of not action. And I think those are much bigger in the medium and long term than the cost of action.
Nina?
I think, a lot of things need to happen to change the situation in the ocean. But making knowledge more available, readily accessible, and holding decision makers increasingly accountable to the decisions they're making as a result of that is really, really important. So together with the Friends of Ocean Action group and a company called Cognite, we've launched a global open ocean data platform where we hope to do exactly that. Bring together state-of-the-art data connected to the oceans and make it more accessible both to decision makers but also to the general public, so that they can actually hold their politicians accountable and become ocean activists like the rest of us.
Enric, who's getting it right? What countries are actually doing this right?
Chile,
Okay.
42% of their exclusive economic zone protected is the size of the continental mass of Chile. Palau, 80% of their waters also fully protected from fishing. The United Kingdom, also almost half of their exclusive economic zone, mostly in overseas territories. There are a few leading countries that have protected more than a third of their waters. And this is very important because the science shows us that we need half of the planet in natural state. The land and the ocean. You maybe have heard about the half-Earth concept. Famous biology Ed Wilson suggested that we need to, and others suggested that we need to have half of the planet in natural state to prevent mass extinction. But it's not just that, it's for us, because we cannot achieve the Paris Climate Agreement goals without nature absorbing half of the CO2 that we throw in the atmosphere. To save the coral reefs, we need healthy forests, right? We need more forest to absorb more CO2, so less CO2 gets in the water of the sea and creates acidification. So it's all connected. We have to look at the entire biosphere and the atmosphere together.
Al Gore, how much hate mail do you get still saying actually climate change doesn't exist? It's
I
invented.
don't read it. I don't know. I recycle it all immediately. But you know what links? You began by asking, are people really aware of how bad it is? And people ask that about climate, about the oceans, about the fact that we're losing one football field worth of forest every second of every day. And the answer to all those questions is no, most people don't realize. And what all of that has in common is, and philosophers have made this point, and it's above my pay grade, but I believe them when they say that we're making a fundamental mistake in believing ourselves to be somehow separate from nature, somehow separate from the natural world. We are intimately interlinked with it, and what we do to the natural world hurts us. And if you step back and look at the planet as a whole, both the climate system and the ocean redistribute heat from the tropics, where much more heat is absorbed from the sun, toward the poles, because any open system tends to even itself out. The Arctic, and Enric said, the ice is going away in the Arctic, that changes the reflectivity, so much more. When the ice is gone, the dark ocean, dark land absorbs much more heat. 90% bounces off the ice and snow, 90% is absorbed by the ocean and land. So, and here's where I'm going with this. Temperatures are going up 2 to 3 times faster in the Arctic as in the rest of the planet. What that means is the pattern of ocean currents and the pattern of wind currents, which both were defined by the redistribution of heat for 12 millennia since the end of the last ice age. Now that's all changing. The Gulf Stream is slowing down. The Northern Hemisphere jet stream is getting chaotic and wavier. This month, for the 4th year in a row, the polar vortex above the North Pole has split in half. And that has consequences. So as long as we feel ourselves to be separate from nature, we will not recognize our responsibility to be stewards of nature. We have the capacity to do it. We have all of the solutions and tools that we need to save the oceans, to stabilize the climate, to save the future. We just have to decide to do it.
But do we have politicians that believe it and want to do it?
We do have some, and we've already heaped a lot of praise rightly on Michelle Bachelet, particularly in her second 8 years as president, also the first 8 years. She was fantastic. We have a lot of good leaders around the world, and we are seeing some regional and state governors and mayors picking up the mantle of leadership that has been dropped by some heads of nation states. But ultimately, it comes back to the people of the world demanding the kind of leadership that humanity deserves. And again, I'll say, the younger generation is demanding a better world. They're rising up. They're striking from schools. They're doing all kinds of things to say we have to have change. In my country, we just had an election, and it was an earthquake election in the House of Representatives, and they called it a blue wave. It was really a green wave, and big changes are underway. And I think that's happening in some other countries as well.
Do you agree with that, Enric?
Totally. And actually, this week in Panama, Pope Francis is hosting the Global Youth Summit, which is the largest concentration of young people in the world. 1 million people are expected to be in Panama this week. And they are going to do the greatest group hug in history. And they are going to they will have a petition for intergenerational solidarity, including action on climate and nature, including asking leaders to agree to protect 30% of the planet by 2030. And that's young people asking for that.
So that's what reserves, which is what, off limits?
We need, it's difficult, we cannot trust humans to manage things sustainably. So we need to, the best way to keep things natural is with protected areas, national parks in the sea or marine reserves. And the results are spectacular. The United States, for example, had the first national park services in history. And for every dollar that the federal government invests in the national park system, that generates $7 in private revenue, right? The Great Barrier Reef, $35 billion of tourism revenue every year, 40 times more than fishing, 60,000 jobs. But climate change is damaging the Great Barrier Reef in such a way that the economic consequences are going to be tremendous.
Nina?
And I think this is an extremely important point, because once we understand the economic benefits that nature provides for us, it also becomes much more manageable for politicians, I think, to make the right decisions. And it's as Mr. Gore says, you need to bring the issues home to people. It needs to become relevant. And I think that's why the plastic issue has gotten so much attention, because people get concerned. I mean, they see it. It's obviously disastrous what it's doing to marine life, but people are also concerned that it's ending up in their drinking water and in their food systems, and how does it impact on human health? And I think the more that we can link ocean and other conservation issues to human health and to financial arguments, the easier it will be to win the battles that we really need to win.
Let me cite one other example of how our mishandling of the oceans, our poor stewardship of the oceans, are affecting us on land. Why are we all of a sudden having what the scientists call rain bombs with these massive downpours? Houston, Texas, 2 years ago, year and a half ago, had rainfall that was, in 5 days, enough water fell on Texas and Louisiana to equal 500 days of the full flow of Niagara Falls. Why? It's coming from the oceans, because we are heating up the ocean so much. We're disrupting the water cycle, meaning we're evaporating much more water vapor from the ocean into the sky. And these atmospheric rivers, the Brazilian scientists call them flying rivers, they were the first to name them, can be 30 times as large as the Mississippi River. And when they come over the land, we have these massive downpours. That's because we're heating up the oceans. Look at India. For 10, 12,000 years, the monsoon cycle has fed and facilitated the birth of civilization in the subcontinent. Now the monsoon cycle is being disrupted, different timing, different places where the water comes down. This threatens the future of human civilization. And we have the ability to take it in hand and solve it. We have to realize how serious it is and demand policy changes.
Okay, I'm going to ask questions from the floor in 5 minutes. But first, if I'm at home watching this, or if I'm a business person in the audience, what do I do? Michelle Bachelet.
Well, just let me add something
Yes.
on a process that should be sustainable. I mean, you need governments and politicians, but you need the people, the youth, not only for, pushing bottoms up, because what we need when we address climate change and ocean preservation is a change of behavior. So you need to educate people. So that's why we started including our curriculum vitae of schools at the more early stages, education on environmental issues. So they will learn new values on that. They will learn how to protect, but also they will bring their conversation to their homes when they have dinner with their parents and so on. So I think that's essential because people has to be part of the solution. It's not only one actor. People has to be part of the solution. But what should I say to somebody who's looking at me? We need action for the ocean now.
Yes.
What do they ask
and
businesses?
I think to that point, this is where, and there's a lot of philanthropists in the audience, I'm sure there's a lot watching us, we have not had as much philanthropy targeting these ocean issues as we would like. It has not been a major part of the global philanthropy programs. And things like that are happening here at this conference, like the Friends of Ocean Action. Number two, tomorrow we have an Ocean Day. We have an entire day programmed with the scientists who are here to discuss the ocean. We want you to come to that and to learn and to be able to take action. We want you to, if you're from one of these countries that has one of these rivers that has all this plastic going into the ocean, we want you to help us get those machines into the river, get that plastic out of the river. Events like this are very critical. People don't have the awareness and understanding of this. That's why philanthropy is helping to fund this panel, for example, and marine protected areas, which are a critical part of ocean health, which have really been pioneered and now proven as a critical part of it. Many of them are independently funded by philanthropy. Even here in the United States, in the Hawaiian marine protected areas, that's an area where private philanthropists, including myself and others, have come in to be able to supplement governmental funds because maybe the government is not as motivated to do a marine protected area. These are all things, actions that you can take now. And there's one other thing you can do. If you see a member of the Japanese delegation who's here, you can talk to them about why are they withdrawing from the IWC and start whaling again. In December, we saw that Japan has withdrawn from the whaling coalition. Is that what we want? We have to do truth to power. There's a lot of examples that we can talk about in those areas. Al also referenced deforestation. We're still losing 1 acre of forest every second. You know, that those executives are here of those countries. We need to have those conversations, you know, eye to eye. These are important things that we have to do now.
And one other point briefly.
Yeah,
we are
Nina.
subsidizing the burning of fossil fuels. Taxpayers around the world are being forced to subsidize the burning of fossil fuels at a rate 38 times larger than the amount of money that's used to encourage the shift to carbon-free energy. Sorry,
Nina.
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, nobody can do everything, but everyone can do something. And I would recommend these three things for people at home. Use your vote. We get the political leaders that we deserve, and unless you vote for the political leaders we need, nothing's going to change. Reduce your meat consumption, because meat is a big driver of climate change, and that's a simple step that you can take. And cut out all single-use plastic in your daily life. Doing those three things, you will have a massive impact.
Enric, your call for action?
Yeah, something similar to what Nina said. I tell people eat more plants and less meat, and that would reduce by more than half the carbon emissions produced by food production. It would be tremendous. But I like to go back to the Vice President's point on the philanthropy. Today, only 2% of philanthropic dollars go to the environment. And most of that is animal welfare, right? And less than 0.1% probably go to the oceans. And the WIS Foundation just made a commitment a few months ago of $1 billion for protected areas, land and sea. And it's, wow, it's the largest commitment ever. Well, compared to the $5.3 trillion that go to subsidize fossil fuels, no, it's ridiculous. So we need more of that. We need more commitment, not only from governments, but from philanthropists. And we have decided at National Geographic to partner with the WIS Foundation on a campaign for nature in the next 2 years to try to push a political agreement of at least 30% of the planet protected by 2030 in the next couple of years.
We also need a lot more basic research in our universities. The ocean has been underexplored. We heard that, understudied. We don't have as many ocean scientists as we need. And this is another area where philanthropists who have been able to make big changes on basic research in top universities around the world should be thinking, can I fund ocean research in my local major university? When you get ready to give your grant, this is low-hanging fruit that if we could understand, like for example, I think a lot of us were surprised a year ago when the Chinese delegation was here talking about how the ocean has a biome, like the way human beings have a biome with bacteria. But if it's disturbed, the Chinese kind of prophesize that potentially the CO2 that's held in the ocean in the biome could be released. But we don't fully understand that. That type of work needs to be funded, and basic research is still needed in the ocean.
Could I see hands up if you want a question so I get an idea? But first I'll go to social media. Don't be shy. You're amongst friends. Troy from California has written in, and he asks, can the redistribution of wealth from wealthy to poorer countries help with this issue? Al Gore.
Yes, and redistribution of wealth within countries, both developed and developing. One of the reasons for the failures of governance in the last few years and the wave of populist authoritarianism is the dramatic and unconscionable rise in inequality. Oxfam released a report here, which was really startling. I hope most of you saw it. The 26 wealthiest individuals in this world now have more wealth than the bottom 3.8 billion people. Now, there are many reasons for this, but they have to be addressed. And in addition to people talk about redistribution, what about predistribution? Let's have adequate health care. Let's have adequate nutrition. Let's have protection for the environment and the air and the water that people need to live healthy lives.
Well, yes, I think it will help, but I have to say there are things you can do that don't cost much more money, and it's just you make the decision and you can go forward. But also, I think in some other countries, but you found that there is money, but it's going to the pockets of some people, so we also need to fight corruption.
Yes.
Because many countries do have money to do the right things, and they don't do it. So it's a whole package of things that we need to
Nina,
address.
and then I'm going to take a question from the floor.
Yeah, no doubt that redistributing money is critical to this, whether it's distributing wealth or getting financial institutions and investors to increasingly invest in the solutions rather than the problems. And of course also getting rid of a lot of the exceptionally harmful subsidies, whether it's linked to fisheries or fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm. I have a question here on the right. Could you stand up so we can frame you?
Hi, I'm Heather Calderway, a National Geographic Fellow with the Zoological Society of London. You talked about change from the last WEF to this one, and I just wondered if this panel happens next year, who would your ideal lineup be, and what would they have done? What action would they have taken to the ocean, for the ocean, to earn their place?
Good question. Marc?
Well, I mean, the number one thing that's been on my mind is these marine protected areas, and specifically, I'm sure we all know that we've been trying to form a marine protected area in the Arctic, but we've had, resistance from several countries that are connected to the Arctic, including, I believe, Russia, China, and Norway. I probably might have it wrong. I don't know. But an Arctic and marine protected area, I think this could be a very powerful moment for preservation of the ocean, and especially some of the changes that we see happening there.
Enric?
In October next year, China will host the Convention on Biological Diversity Conference that is going to be the equivalent of the Paris Conference on Climate. This is the time and the place where the world leaders are going to agree on how much space we are willing to give to nature, both ocean and land. So a high-level Chinese official on this panel committing to lead the process with very ambitious targets for the next decade on nature protection, including the ocean.
A question on my right.
Yes, my name is Nakao, ADB President, Asian Development Bank, and for the first time in our history, we will have an annual meeting in Fiji, in the Pacific Island countries, and we'll pick up ocean health and also sustainable tourism. It's interrelated. But anyway, my question is, this is a very typical example of externality, negative externality. The cost will go to the global community, and the benefit is to use a convenient plastic cup. So we need regulations, and we need a cooperative collective actions by the international community. We cannot just rely on the conscientiousness of the people. So what kind of arrangement, international arrangement, like you said, COP kind of arrangement is needed, isn't it?
Yes.
International arrangement.
I'd like to pick up on what you've said and focus on your use of the word externality, because this is an issue that is central to the ecological crisis that we're facing. We have a system for measuring the value of the choices we make, the policies we follow, the goods and services we buy, that is utterly insane, because the word externality to economists means forget about it. We measure some things and we decide to ignore the quality of the environment, for example, the distribution of income, for example, the impact of pollution, the extraction of natural resources. This all goes back to Bretton Woods. Really, before Bretton Woods, a famous economist, Simon Kuznets, in 1937, established GDP and the system of accounts that we all use, and the corporate accounting is derived from that. And the inventor of it said, please don't use this as a guide for economic policy. And 7 years later at Bretton Woods, it was codified, and we still use it. But as a result, it's like driving a car with a dashboard that gives you faulty information. We're driving the economy of nations and the world according to information that is completely wrong. And it's not an easy problem to fix, but it is crucial that we do fix it.
Nina?
Increasingly, I think we need to get the right tools to hold governments and corporations accountable. So what about a global dashboard, in a way, to use your word, to actually monitor what the governments are doing in terms of the commitments that they have made, whether it's at conferences like this or in international meetings. So that they can both track the progress that they are making, but that people in general can also hold their political leaders and large corporations accountable.
Question there in the middle, and then the gentleman on the left.
Andre Hoffman from the MAP Foundation. We've heard that politicians and institutions and even NGOs are not sufficiently geared up to do something for the ocean. One of the things that I can envisage, and I would like to know if that is something that might be possible, is there a business opportunity in cleaning up the ocean?
Yes.
You've individually mentioned that there are, tourism there. How do we collectively create a level playing field where businesses can, for profit, and I don't mean for fortune making, but for profit, enter this arena and make a difference?
Well, as we know that we look, the combination of entrepreneurship, capital, and risk can create amazing companies. And we have somebody in the front row here, Daniela Fernandez with the Sustainable Ocean Alliance. Stand up, Daniela, so everybody knows who you are, who's created an accelerator, incubator, and has business plans and business teams coming from all over the world, and funding. I've given her funding. Many people in the audience have given her funding for those organizations as a nonprofit to get going and create new businesses. I think innovation is one way out of this, and we need more innovation. We need all this new technology, all these new ideas that have come to us. We can potentially use this. In addition to all the other things that we're talking about, we must innovate. That is a critical part of our next generation action. And Peter, I really think that you should also stand up and tell us where we are today with the UN and the oceans.
I'm going to take a question and then we'll come to you, Peter. Sorry, I'm running out of time, Marc. This is like throwing me. Sir, question.
We'll stop time and keep things going.
Okay, Gilberto Marin from...
Make one quick announcement.
Yeah, thank you.
Take a mic.
Take a mic.
Behind you right here is your microphone.
Take a mic.
Yeah.
Breaking news, because it hasn't happened yet.
Great, perfect.
But I'm confident enough that it will happen that I'll say it here now. The other great thing that's going to happen in 2020 is that we will have the second UN Ocean Conference that we've been calling for. You'll remember that under SDG 14, the ocean goal that is there to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources, that SDG 14 has got 10 targets. 4 of those mature next year. So it would be irresponsible for us not to hold ourselves to account next year. And the resolution which is being considered by the United Nations General Assembly at the moment is to have this conference, the second one, you'll remember the first one was hosted by Fiji and Sweden, to have the second one hosted by Portugal and Kenya, keeping up that developing country partnership, in Lisbon, first week of June next year. And part of our job there, of course, will be to assess how we've gone on those 4 targets. And they are, removal of harmful fisheries subsidies, big job for WTO. We're pushing that hard. I'm fairly confident on that one. The 10% of marine protected areas, I'm very confident on that one. We've got to go up from there to 30% next year in Beijing and in Lisbon, and etc. You run out of time. I'll give you the others.
Michelle Bachelet,
Okay.
you're a former head of state. Does this matter?
Okay.
Do these meetings matter? Do they really make a difference?
Of course.
And then we'll come to the question.
Okay.
What I've learned that it's not enough to have a resolution, because because usually resolutions don't have mechanisms to hold accountable anyone. So the issue is that what Nina mentioned, I think, is very important. We need to do all those, but we need to think how countries will be held accountable. What happens? Yeah. Because today, if you don't do enough, nothing happens. So I think they're indispensable. But we need to find ways, and this is one of the discussions that in July will be done in New York in the high-level political forum on SDGs, on Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the issues that some people were going to bring to the discussion is, do we have to include mechanisms for accountability to ensure that everyone does the best they can?
Okay, the gentleman who's very patient, who's been cut off 5 times.
No problem. Gilberto Marin from Mexico. I have been here from the last 20 years on Davos Forum, and really I want to congratulate all the members of the panel, especially Mr. Gore and Michelle Bachelet, because this can be the #1 I have seen. That's the good news. The bad news, it is that in this forum, I suggest that every year they have to be a big note in order to see what is the progress that we are doing. Because there are many, many panels, but at the end we don't know where we are really staying. So maybe 10 points, so everybody can receive a note in which saying we are doing very well here, very bad here, whatever. And the last, which is the question, of course we miss a lot Mr. Donald Trump, especially for this session. So what you will tell him about what to do urgently in the United States, especially for this situation?
Yeah, well, my colleague John Kerry answered that question yesterday, and he gave the same answer I gave to that question a year ago. He should resign, in my opinion. But I don't want to inject partisan politics into this. Why not? No. I will say that I think that whether you agree or disagree with President Trump, and I hope you disagree, he has become the global face of climate denial and environmental and ocean denial. And I think that in itself is significant, because a lot of people are saying, I don't want to be associated with that. In my country, several of the college young Republicans, that's the party of Donald Trump, have given notice to the National Party, we may leave the party unless you change your policies on the environment. Today, there was a new public opinion study, the highest level of support for cleaning up the environment ever measured in the U.S. I don't think that's an accident. I think Mother Nature's signals are largely responsible for it, but I think it's also in reaction to the fact that the overwhelming majority don't agree with President Trump.
Yeah, very short, but as it says what Al Gore says, on the other hand, there is one hope, because in your country, a lot of mayors, a lot of governors, and a lot of companies have said, we do believe that climate change is a reality. We're continuing working on it.
Okay, I have a question from Twitter, and then I have, I think, one final question over there. But Gloria in the US is writing in on Twitter, thank you for watching, saying, tell me about a specific plan to clean up the ocean. Enric and then Nina.
10 rivers bringing more than 80% of the plastic into the ocean. This is the leverage point. If we figure out a way, if we understand how the plastic gets into those rivers and how can we improve not only the production of plastic that is not just single use and non-recyclable, but the waste management issue, that would be a humongous contribution.
Nina?
Yeah, I think there's only one solution to this. I mean, it's stop the use of wasteful single-use plastics. And secondly, we need global waste management systems to deal with this. It's not as sexy as a lot of fun technological advances in the oceans or cleanup operations, but it's the only thing that really works and will make a difference. And we, as a global community, really need to get behind that in the areas of the world that are struggling to get this in order at the moment.
We've also got to stop dumping 500,000 Hiroshima bombs worth of heat into the oceans every day. Because it's plastic and it's pollution, but it's also the boiling of the oceans. You know, right now, fish are fleeing areas of the tropics where 1 billion people rely on them for their primary source of protein. They're going poleward, some going lateral, some of them going deeper. They're fleeing because oxygen levels are less as the oceans warm, but the fish metabolism is higher as the temperature goes up. So they're burning more oxygen, but they're getting less of it. So they're fleeing the regions where people depend on them for their diet. So we've got to stop trapping all this heat in the ocean.
Question.
Hi, Cliff Brangman from Princeton University. I just want to echo a point that was raised, but I think deserves to be highlighted. That so much of what's going on in the ocean we don't understand, and I think that's because there has been very little research done on marine organisms. I think Marc Benioff made this point. Many of the organizations, so I'm from the United States and been affiliated with the Marine Biological Laboratory and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And these are really amazing organizations, but they're financially just constantly struggling. And I think that, philanthropists in the audience are listening. I think these are amazing opportunities.
Yeah.
I also just want to echo this point related to innovation. I agree that we need to constantly innovate. The technologies of tomorrow come from the discoveries in basic research today. And the ocean, with its incredible biodiversity, I mean, there's an enormous number of drugs and sort of bio-evolved technologies to discover in this space. Enormous commercial opportunities, and I think that is actually very nicely in sync with conservation efforts.
Thank you so much for raising that point. And I think exactly to your point, we need more knowledge. We need to enable scientists to get the data to really improve our decision making when it comes to the oceans. And this is why we are building the world's largest research and expedition vessel at the moment, and we will offer this as a free platform to scientists from all over the world to come on board, do their science, and create concrete solutions. And I would encourage philanthropists from all over the world to commit and engage in the same way. Because as Enric said earlier, less than 1% of global philanthropy is currently going to the oceans. We need more to go to science, and we need more to go to the oceans specifically.
How much difference will the next 12 months make? If we're on the same panel, January 2020, what will be the different issues? Enric.
We need to get to the end of 2020 with 10% of the ocean protected, which is doubling the currently protected surface. That would make an enormous difference. That thing alone would be huge.
Nina?
I think we'll still be struggling with some of the same issues, ocean acidification, climate change, plastics. I would hope to see more focus on investors and their responsibility in terms of shifting what they are investing in and what they should not be investing in. And I would like, as a part of a panel like this next year, to see the CEO of BlackRock and the CEO of the Norwegian Bank's Investment Management Sovereign Wealth Fund to talk about what they are doing in terms of sustainability.
Marc?
Well, I think I'm going to have to pivot back to science. I think that we need more research. That we see a lot of philanthropy going. People want to launch themselves into space and go build a colony on Mars. We have a lot of work to do right here on planet Earth. And I think before we dump those billions of dollars into that, we should be really doing exactly what we just heard from a great ocean scientist, and there's other ocean scientists in the audience, and they need directed basic research funding. Now, that's true of a lot of science worldwide. You could talk about cancer research. You can talk about a lot of things in the same breath. But we need more ocean science research now.
Michelle Bachelet.
Well, I hope you don't need me to invite me again next year, because we will have many other governments and many other politicians that are champions for the oceans.
Al Gore.
You're going to see a lot of progress. And if I may say, one reason is my friend Marc Benioff, behind the scenes, also in front of the scenes, but behind the scenes, has been a force of nature moving this issue up the agenda here at the World Economic Forum. I guarantee you he's going to make sure that it's a bigger issue next year.
Okay, so you definitely get invited back. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to our TikTok viewers.